Okay, so um can I call you Dante?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, all right. So you said that you just went to a meeting about the general strike, is that correct?
Yeah.
All right, cool. Yeah, I'm super interested in hearing about that. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So, for anyone who doesn't know about the general strike, we're on genstrike.org. It's mostly about rent striking or labor striking, and it's grassroots platforms. There's not really like a leader or anything. I
Mhm.
guess non-compete would be the one who sort of started it, but uh, he's an anarchist, so
Mhm.
of course he doesn't really believe in that sort of hierarchy. And so yeah, we're just
So what was
mostly
the meeting
about.
about? Yeah, like can you go into some of the things that you talked about at the meeting?
Oh, the meeting. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
it was mostly about like what should we call it, or organizational rhetoric, like how we should present ourselves and like how we should work on social platforms and stuff like that.
Okay, cool. So what was for people who weren't able to make it, whether for whatever reason, myself included, can you give me any of the general bits of advice for how to be able to? Because I mean, like, let's say that I'm trying to advocate for the general strike on my platform. What things can I be doing to help with that cause?
Yeah, for sure. I think one of the main things would be to
Hey.
sort of to know your audience
Hmm.
and to know sort of what they would like and what sort of rhetoric they would uh, adhere to or listen to, uh, connect to, I guess. Um, so because we're talking a lot about like, because we're obviously trying to cast a wide net,
Hmm.
but there's a lot of room to focus in on your sort of your own angle, I
Yeah.
suppose. Uh, so
Okay, so that I mean like
uh,
that makes sense. So what you're saying is to just really focus on making sure we're tailoring our language to the people in our audience, right? To make sure that we're uh advertising our ideas in such a way that would be most receptive to the people who are following us.
yeah, basically.
Hmm.
So me being a big like YouTube watcher person,
Hmm.
like I would expect you to do like, oh, this is how you can uh, go about it in a legal sense, and
Hmm.
then like someone like Vosh would go strike or your fucking c word or whatever he would say, uh, uh, and Sander Hall would do his version. I just think it's important that like striking is not, it's not simply a lefty or socialist thing
Hmm.
necessarily. Historically, it has been, of course,
Sure.
but I think it's important that you see all the important aspects. Like you can rent strike because you're maybe right now literally not getting any money.
Hmm.
So how else would you do it? You know?
Yeah. No, and I mean like and that makes sense. That makes sense. So let me ask you then, if I were to give people constructive advice, right? Like not just like a policy consideration, but like things that they could practically do. What advice could I give people on my platform?
Um, I think the number one thing that uh, Genstrike advocates for is the what's it called, the like the calling card. It's you are not alone, and
Hmm.
that you shouldn't do anything by yourself, and you
Okay.
should talk to the people closest to you about how you can affect what the thing that affects you.
Hmm.
So if you live in a apartment building, talk to your neighbors. Uh,
Yeah.
if you work at a, I don't know, a clothing store, talk to your coworkers, or wherever you work. Uh, just so you know that you don't have to work alone, and you can ask Genstrike for advice on how to reach out, and yeah, just know that you're not alone.
Yeah. No, I mean that makes a lot of sense, right? My understanding, just me living in an apartment complex, right? It's unfortunately a pretty common reality that I do not know most of the people who I live by, right? And I do think that works in to the advantage of people like landlords or people who own and who rent property, right? And that it does sort of like you're able to get a lot of advantage against those people, at least a lot of leverage when you start actually collaborating and talking with the people in your community, right? It can be a little awkward for some people. I know it can be awkward for people to talk to people who they have never spoken to in their life, right? Like I know it can become like it can be awkward to just go up to your neighbor who you've never spoken to and who you've seen like tons of times in the hallway and be like, "Hey, we're kind of in this really peculiar situation. Do you want to talk about this and maybe get some other people to talk about it as well?" Right? Like once you're in that sort of like once you get over the hump of awkwardness at talking to people, then yeah, like I can definitely see where you're coming from, and that like once you start getting people together who have common problems and start thinking of common solutions, I think that there can be a lot of headway with that. um I guess I'd also just make sure to advise people to make sure that whatever they do, that they are safe and that they do not put themselves in any form of jeopardy unless they feel as a community it is something which like unless it's some sort of risk which they as a community are fine with assuming, right? But only if there's like informed consent with everyone involved, right? Like I want to like my first and foremost consideration from I guess my you know perspective on this is to make sure that there is always advancement of the interests of the people involved, right? Like particularly the people who live there, like the renters, right? That their interests are always advanced and that they don't take actions which could end up substantially harming them in the long run. That doesn't mean don't strike. I generally am of the opinion that that's the right thing to do, just to make sure that you're going about it in such a way as to make sure you're not going to end up harming yourselves, if that makes sense.
Oh yeah, 100%.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's the biggest thing about Genstrike for me, at least. This is 100% personally, but like I might not be an anarchist, or I might not be a communist, or I might not even be a socialist, but everyone can agree that like worker rights and healthcare rights and strike rights is a big thing for me personally. I think
Mm-hmm.
you should absolutely have the opportunity to strike if you feel that you've been uh,
Yeah, I told it like if you feel like like your personal rights have been infringed on by someone else, or you feel like your personal autonomy has been infringed on by someone else or a larger force in society, is where
oh
I
yeah,
assume
yeah,
you're
yeah,
going with
yeah,
that.
thank you, yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
exactly.
yeah. I totally hear you. I totally hear you. So yeah, I'll see if I can clip this and I'll put this up before. Unless there's something else you want to talk about, can you give anyone who's watching some general information on where they can find out more about Genstrike, like any website again, or any social media, or anywhere in particular that they should go to learn more?
Yeah, so we're on genstrike.org, there's a lot of information there,
Mhm.
where I guess what you what you would say in the US of A, we're bipartisan. We're not really necessarily a socialist or anarchist movement. We're
Mhm.
just for worker rights. We're on Instagram. I know. I'm I'm not personally on Instagram, but we're on Instagram and we're on Facebook, and yeah, there's just a lot of outlets. But if you want to get engaged, go to genstrike.org and contact us. And there's a lot of work to be done, and you can probably help. Either like even if you don't think you have any skills, you probably have some skills, my
Mhm.
friend. Yeah, you probably do. Like, it's not hard to write down a press release or make some memes or do some graphics. Everyone can do their part.
Yeah, no, and I totally hear that. Actually, just to comment on that, I mean, I've talked before about how before I came to law school, I worked as the program director for a homeless outreach nonprofit. That was a ton of work, but mind you, a lot of very important work that I did for a lot of people are things which anyone could do, right? Like whether it's something like whether it's something like getting someone to the hospital or just like making someone some food who asks for it, right? Like there's always work that can be done, and sometimes a lot of it's busy work, but it's important, right? Like it could be the difference between whether or not, like in the case of the work that I did, someone getting through the day, whether or not they go to sleep starving or hungry or not. And I suppose in the instance we're talking about now, the difference of whether or not someone is homeless or not, right? Like it's very important work, but there's a lot of it that can be done. And just based on my experience, a lot of it probably doesn't require any sort of specialized knowledge or expertise, just the willingness to get involved. So I very much appreciate that. I think a lot of people sort of get hung up on that, like there's some sort of requirement of basic knowledge to get in, and no, like the highest, the most important requirement for helping other people ultimately is a willingness to do it, right? After that, like once you get that threshold, that basic requirement, most other things will come naturally, So yeah, I deeply appreciate that. So thank you so much for yeah, thank you for coming on. I'll try and clip this later, and I'll try and make it into a formal video, do my part, I suppose. And yeah, thank you for coming by and sharing that. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much.
All right, I'll talk to you later. All right, everyone else, let's go to the close friends chat and we can get some pirates going.